So, as a second webinar in this series on the block editor, we thought we'd go from showing some really exciting finished layouts and things from last time and taking a step back and going and looking at the interface of the block editor and some of the more just grounding things, where to find things and all of that. So I'm just going to start kind of from the top of what the block editor would look like. And so let's just swap over to, this is a block editor article I was going to be working with through here. So let's take a look at all the parts here and break them down, because I know this is quite a bit more on the screen than you may be used to with, for instance, this is the same article over in the classic editor. So there's quite a bit of difference, but a bunch of the parallels are going to be, let's take a look. So the main content area is very similar to this classic editor view here, where you can see all of your content and everything. It's all in one big block in the classic editor. And the variant here is, while you still have your main content here, all of these are now represented by individual blocks containing all of that same content, the text content here. So that is going to be one of our similar things. One thing I did want to note about this that is different from the classic is if we switch over to this same editor in the block editor, the content area here allows you to preview. This little icon under here looks like a little screen here, and it allows you to preview directly in this content area for different device sizes. So you can switch from desktop to tablet to mobile and get an idea of how your content's going to reflow. And then if you really want to get the final version, this is a good preview in this way. But some things that are theme-based across our sites and whatnot, some font choices and things won't show up until you do a preview in a new tab. So I'll just do that real quick. And this will generate basically the preview that includes all of the widgets and the blocks, and you'll get the pretty much of a final version of what things are going to look like before you publish. So this is basically what's in the content view, how to preview it on different device sizes, and then also how to check your final preview. And as you can see, the headings and whatnot are a bit different. Click back. The formatting and everything is here, but once you're actually in the full preview, you can see the colors are ever so slightly different, and some of the font sizes are slightly different, and that's basically going to be reflected from the theme we're using for this, and that should be pretty consistent through everything. And if you have any questions at any point, just put them up. I've got the chat block up here, so we can take a look there. The next big portion here will be the top toolbar. So this is a little different as well. If we come back to the block editor, I can show you where this lives. This is this big toolbar across the top here. It's got your article headline is up here, and you've got controls for undo, redo. You can use the add block button, also lives up here when this is open. And then once again, you have the preview settings. If you, depending on if you're in draft or if you've got published or whatnot, these options will be different, will reflect update or something like that if it's already been published. One other thing that's over here is this is the toggle to turn the right sidebar off over here. And then on this side, this three dot, this is the toggle for the list view and document overview stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. I just wanted to go through the available options here on the top toolbar. Lastly, there's a three-dot menu that gives you much more options here. For if we wanted to go full screen mode, I can toggle that off. And as you see, that hides the admin bar if you don't need that. A couple other things that are in here. The top toolbar can be can do a couple of things. That's a consolidation, but I usually leave that off so that, as you can see, it moves the this toolbar is actually the block toolbar when you have this set. We'll go through that again so I don't want to confuse too much. But that particular one allows you to move that up into the top toolbar and then have some other things up there. But these are just some interface options to look at. By default, this is what you're going to see when you open this up. You have a top toolbar, and then you'll have a toolbar that hovers between each block. And so speaking of, we went through these options. The next one is the block toolbar. So when you have a block selected, there's going to be a floating toolbar that hops up above it, and it's going to give you some options here. Once again, I'll go back and actually click on these directly so you can see what these are. There's a 3-dot menu here for some copying and duplicating. You can even copy styles and things. It's a little more advanced, but this is also where if you want to delete a block, you can do some things in there. And we'll talk about some of these other options as we go along. Since this is a text block, or a paragraph block indeed, you have your typography stuff that you've seen before, your bolds, italics. You can select a piece of text and add a link to it. And then in this little chevron dropdown, you actually have some extra types of text input. If you, maybe something like strike through might be useful here. Some of these are a little bit more niche in using those types of things. All right. Check for questions. Okay. And let's see, I went through everything here on the block settings and our block toolbar. And then let's look at the next place you find settings. This is once again when you're selecting a block. This is this right sidebar that you toggled here and off. Whatever happens to be selected, this will be the options for that particular block. So it'll tell you what kind of block it is. And all of these text-based blocks have text color, background colors, and then some typography options. And I've got a section we can go into these a bit more in detail in a moment. And then also in the settings sidebar, you also have the full article or post or whichever content type you're working with. This is where a lot of those options are going to be, such as choosing your featured image. We've got where you can do a custom excerpt, and a lot of these are very similar. If I hop back over, these are very similar to the right sidebar over here, where you've got your published settings, your attributes, your featured image, of course, is a little further down in this sidebar, but you can drag and drop those around as needed. But those live all in here as well. And categories, all these kind of things. So this is the article level settings, and then the block level settings appear when you have a block set. And you can see those update as you click through and see the different blocks. Okay. Those are the two. We got our block tab settings and our article tab settings. Let's go ahead and move on. This is just a quick little overview of what some of the things do. So adding blocks. One of the ways you can add a block is if you have a block selected, and this can be a little finicky sometimes to get it to hide. Yeah, you see how there's the plus kind of when you hover, it will appear somewhat below one of the blocks you're trying to get it into. However, I would recommend, and I'll talk a good bit more about the list view, but basically if you have a block selected and you come up to this top block plus and we add an image, what it's going to do is add that directly below the block you were setting, which can be very helpful. Because if you don't have a block selected and you add a new block, most often it'll add it all the way at the bottom and you'll have to like move it and drag it back up. So if you want to place a block specifically somewhere, such as adding another paragraph just below this paragraph, you would select that paragraph. And then I still have the block library open, so I can still just grab another paragraph and we have a new paragraph block to work with.
Christopher, could I stop you for a sec?
Please.
All right, so if you could highlight the previous block that has content, click the 3 dots. You could also add before or after, all the way at the end, please.
Oh, yes, of course.
And then you could either duplicate So if you wanted to have it there, or you could add a block before or after, and that's another way you can do it.
And I will say, since this may be a little hard to read, there are keyboard shortcuts for these. So this is, let me see, Option Shift T before and Y. So Option Shift Y, or some T. I may have to fiddle with those, but yeah, you can just add after, and that will do the same thing. And it looks like what that's going to do is it's going to add another block of the same type in that case. Versus if you select this and you wanted to add an image type, you would need to add that from the library. Using these is going to add the same block type that you're selecting after or before. That's a good point. Thank you, Vera. And now I'll come back to the list view so we can see. And anytime you're in the list view and you select one of these, you'll see it get highlighted in there. And then there's a 3-dot menu here as well that's exactly the same as the 3-dot menu in the block toolbar. So you have all these same options if you need to delete something or if you wanted to add before or after. There's lots of functionality that's found both in the list view options here as well as the block toolbar. Okay. And I'll get rid of this one as well. Okay, come back over here. Moving blocks. Anytime you have a block selected, there's going to be these arrows right here. And basically you can click and that will just slide a block up and down. Or you can grab a block in the list view and just drag it down. So those are two different ways of reordering blocks. Selecting blocks and deleting blocks, we kind of already went through that. You can either click on a block directly in the content area, or you can select a block in the list view, and it will do exactly the same thing. Sometimes the list view is helpful on some of these larger ones because you don't have to do as much scrolling to get to the block you want to look at. And deleting blocks, we went through that. Okay. Next up, okay, so I did want to spend some time a little bit here on the list view because this is one of the biggest differentiators from the classic editor is having access. Because everything is contained within its own blocks, you need some way to kind of navigate through that, know what you're selecting and all these kind of things. So back over here, I've got the list view open and I'll start up at the top. So the first paragraph is here. Our first heading is here, paragraphs, all these kind of things. So if you have some things that are embedded, like here's a list view. And what's interesting about a list view is it has a list container, and then you can twirl this down, and then you actually see how it's highlighting the individual list items. That's definitely another thing about the block editor, is because if you know a way a list is built, you usually have like a list container and then you have all the list items in that. And so that's what's being reflected by this list kind of being a container for the list items. And so this is one case where you can actually reorder the list items directly inside the list container if you wanted. This is something you wouldn't be able to do in the classic editor without basically copying and pasting and things like that. So that can be another very helpful thing too. And also to know if you're selecting, if you just click on one of the list items, you're not necessarily selecting the list group itself. So if you wanted to move down, oh, I'm only moving these list items. I wanted to move the whole list. So if we take a look at the toolbar, there's actually this list item icon. And then to the left, you see the tooltip. It may be a little hard to read, so I'll read it out. It says select the parent block, and it tells you what that is. And so if you want to select the list, you click that button. And as you see in the list editor, or the list view, it went up and selected that list object. Sorry that the list is being used in two different ways, but I hope it's fairly clear. So something like if we wanted to assign a background color, this is assigning the background color to the list container itself. And then if we select some of these, we don't have color options because this is a list item, but you can change the text color. So in this case, you can see you have an individual list item with a very different color. And then on the parent, you could also have a pink background or something like that. So this is kind of a way where you can make sure you're using the list view to know which items you're selecting. You can reorder them via here, and you can also make sure you're selecting the quote unquote parent objects of anything that's that it has that is acting as a container object, that kind of idea. And this way, when you're selecting the top level list item, you just move the whole list up at once. It's kind of like a group, which will be the next thing we take a look at. Let's see. Selecting blocks, drag and drop. We looked at the quick actions because those three dot menus are very similar to the ones that are in the toolbar. And now let's take a look at selecting more than one block. This is something you absolutely is not really something that happens in the classic editor. So if we come down here, and I'm going to select this heading, and then if we come over into the list block, we can do this two ways. I can shift and click on the two paragraph blocks that are below, and you see they get selected in the list view, or you can shift select them directly in the list view. And this is going to kind of start moving us into a little bit of layout work where you can take a group of blocks and create a group. And if you see what happens in the list view, it has now added the heading and those two paragraphs under this group. And similar to the list, you can select one of the paragraphs inside. Here's the paragraph. And then once again, now this leftmost icon is what will select the parent. And in this case, the parent block is the group itself. So you can basically get a similar behavior as we had with the list view, but now we have it using any types of blocks. In this case, it's a mixture of heading blocks and two paragraph blocks. So once again, you can move these as an entire group, or once again over here with the color just to set it off, you can see the entire group gets the background versus having to set like the color for the heading and the two paragraphs separately. And actually, I think if we did that separately on these two, depending on how things are working, you may end up with a little bit of a spacer in there. And instead, we want this whole thing to have a nice background. So that's one of the cases where you would group what you want to have the background of, which in this case is this full group, and then you could assign the background to that, and it would just assign this to the whole container itself. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to add a little bit more content so I can show you a little bit of how that works with other types of things such as images. But let me come back to my reference here. Yeah, we're basically into this next part where we're looking at the transformations. So what I did here was I selected 3 items and put them into a group. Now, there's a couple of transformation things that can happen. So let's just start with a more basic one. If we take this list, here's the icon for the block. And if you click on that, this will give you a list of the transformations that are available for this block. And not all of these will be relevant. One was a group, so you could do a group of a list. So you can get pretty nested. That's one reason the list view is helpful, because if I attach this to a group or create a group and twirl that down, now you can see the group contains the list, which then contains the list items. And this is where being able to click into the list view is much easier to know what you're actually selecting. And if I select the list again, we'll select the parent, and then if you come back and reselect the group, or I'm sorry, if you select the group, the 3-dot menu has options for ungrouping if you want to undo that. And if I do that, it basically just shifts right back to the list not being in a group. So it's very non-destructive. You can go and make changes and then revert changes as long as you kind of know where things are found. And a lot of them are found both in the block toolbar and in the 3-dot menus for both of those. So let's go back and transform this into paragraphs. And look what it did. It basically broke it up into paragraphs, and it even kept the background for each of those paragraphs, which is fun, but maybe not what we're looking at. And the other thing is that it left us with all of the paragraphs still being selected. So what that allows us to do is now use the toolbar to transform them. And I'll hover over this. Let me actually come back to the transform and we'll go through these real quick. So depending on what the list type or the block type is, you have a certain types of transformations. You can't just transform anything into anything, but paragraphs to headings and vice versa, lists to quotes, lists to paragraphs I just showed. I'll show you the image to cover. And then what I'm showing you right now is the individual or multiple blocks being converted into a group. And then this last one, once something is in a group, you can also then say, well, should that group be a row or a stack or a grid? And I will demonstrate that here. So this is the list that I exploded into the paragraphs. Now we can group those again. And then that group can go and become, let's say, a grid. And they'll even give you a little preview here. Now, this isn't normally the way you would work with a list, but I did want to at least show you how you can transform certain types of content into other types of content. So as you see, this is just a grid block with all of these paragraphs in there. And when you're working with a grid, and we've got other write-ups on these specific blocks, so I won't go too far into these, but you have options to manually do the number of of columns and things like that. And to be honest, even with this being in a grid, you could still convert this over to a list. And then the list will just live in the first block of the grid. And then you can drag, once again, I hadn't mentioned this yet, but the other thing you can do with the drag and drop is not just reordering, but you can drag blocks into other blocks. So if I take this heading, I can drag it into the grid. And now it's the heading and the list is the second part of the grid. So then if we really want, we can come back to the grid and we can make this just a vertical stack. And it pretty much looks like a normal heading with a list. But if we added something like an image to the mix, just for fun, we can now have this image be in the stack. But if we change the stack to back to the grid we were working with, now you can see how this can be kind of fun. Because if we change this to, you can get a stack here of one column, stack with two, stack with three or four. These kind of things can be useful. One of the fun things I found, this is a bit more of an advanced topic, but I will show some of the things that are available here. You see how there's, in the settings, there's spans. This only happens when you're in one of the grids, but I have the headings selected. And if I change this, I can actually make the heading span all three columns. And then you have the other bits of the grid flowing below. So this is how we've been creating some of the more advanced type of layouts, is being able to create grids and groups and then drag and drop items into and out of these depending on how you want to make a layout. So this is just one way of making some more advanced layouts with the basic building blocks we've already been using. And the other thing that's fun about this is if you don't want any of this in there, you can just drag the heading out, can drag the list out, even drag the image out, and now you just have these as normal blocks. And then the grid block is just kind of hiding there empty, and so you can delete that. Let's see. I'm going to see if there was any questions coming up. Okay. Another place where this might be useful is, let's say I'm going to just add a second image in this case. And I'll grab, I think we got another paper logo I can toss in there. And so we've got now, come back to the list view with this little toggle. Now we've got these two images, and I'll scroll up just a little bit because this guy went off to the side, and you can see, you can basically right from here, you can change this to a group, a row, a stack, or a grid. So if I change this to a grid, immediately those two are added. And it has these default settings on how big the columns are. So that's why I usually just go and click over to manual and select the number so we can get these looking nice. And then once again, you still have these images that are in here. Okay. Let's see. And on some of them, you'll have, I haven't gone into this too much because these are more of the advanced blocks, these kind of like layout blocks. We get into, I think I have these mentioned. Yeah, we don't need these. And here, this is some of the more visual stuff where you can do color settings, background options, depending on the types of blocks. That dimensions and spacing was what we saw with the spanning of the columns and things like that for ones that are built. So in this case, you can basically add maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 images, select them all together, and then with one click, they'll can be tossed into a grid, and then the grid can be changed on the fly just with these from a row. In this case, in a row, it has some nice justification where you can change the alignments and things like that. And these are just all in the settings for I call the group row, because as you see, it's got all 4 icons here. So this is the group, row, stack, grid, and all of this is the same block, and you can just on the fly determine how it's going to function and lay things out. So I find this one to be the most helpful for doing funky layouts that require side by side items and stuff like that. Because technically, we still have the option, if I pull this image out into just the normal flow, you still have the alignment that you've seen in the classic editor. So if you just align this to the right, and we'll shrink it down a little bit, you can see it does the text wrapping just like it would in the classic editor, where you can just change the alignments here, no problem. Okay.
Hey,
And I've got another
Christopher,
post on a lot of this image stuff that I can refer you guys to. Was there a question?
I had one. Well, I guess could you explain what some of the examples would be that you would use the grid, the row, and the stack? I was thinking like recipes. You could have the ingredients on one side and the instructions on the other side. I was
Yeah, that
thinking
would be a
maybe
good one here.
Q&A.
If this was sourdough bread, and these are your ingredients.
Yeah.
Text paragraphs go into sourdough bread, I'm pretty sure. And so then we would select, let me grab the image. We'll just assume that's sourdough bread. And so I'll select the heading, the list, and the image. And then I'm going to pop that into a grid. And and as you see, it's still got the span headings from before. And if I select the grid and change the number of columns, that looks a little better. And then with the list, if we wanted that to span, let's make sure this works. You can see how you can have the ingredient span across, and then you would just have your food picture over here. So the way this is working is we've got a grid with 3 columns. We've got a heading that's set to span the 3 columns, so it basically takes over. We can even change this to align to center, so you can tell that it's basically its block is covering all 3 columns based upon this setting here. And then the list is having our ingredients, and that's set to span the 2 columns of this row, and then the image itself is just by default living in the last region of that second row. So this is a place where you could create recipes and things like that. And then the call out itself if we come up to the grid level and come over, so this is the general settings, which is where you do columns and things like that. And then this little guy here is the styles. And this is similar to the same thing we saw when we were looking at the settings for something like a paragraph block or a heading block. You have your text color, your background color, and some typography options here if you wanted to do anything. Main thing here would be if you want to set the recipe off a little bit, we can use a solid color, something like this, or what's even more fun, if you click the gradient tab, you can start with one of the gradient presets, and then you can even click on these colors themselves and kind of tailor this however you'd like. You can drag these around for all kinds of colors, or if you even have a style sheet that has definitive colors, like 023468 is the OHT dark brown, or dark blue, I mean. And then you could bring the transparency down, come back over to the other one and make this a little darker and stuff. So you have a lot of control over some of these things to set this off and how it might look. So that is the grid and group blocks and kind of how to create from existing blocks, or even if you wanted to, let's say, let's just scroll down, and after this paragraph, we wanted to just add, and you can do a search and you can add a group block directly. And what that's going to do is it's going to get this. So this is a little different from creating a group from existing blocks. This is going to give you kind of like an empty template. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a grid. And what it's going to do, and it's right here, you see it's exactly the same. We got the grid, row, stack options. These are all right here. So the options are exactly the same. Let me come back to the list view, and so you can see what this looks like. You see it's a grid, but it doesn't have the little twirl down thing because it actually doesn't contain anything. So there's two things. You could either click the plus and add a new block, or in this case, can I drag? Yep, I can drag the heading directly over the grid, and it adds it into that first block of the grid. So you can create a blank grid and drag things into it, and a lot of fun things like that. So that'll pop that in there. We'll go back to two columns, this kind of thing. And if we wanted to do a stack, this is an interesting kind of call out of using a row versus a grid. So you take a look, and we have, let me change this back to two. You don't have a lot of alignment stuff with the grids, but if you wanted to have alignment, like vertical alignment specifically, that's where you would switch this to a row, and now you have these alignment options. So you could have your heading be nice and bold with a color, and then you have a bit of text over here on the right as like a details explaining that particular option, something like that. It could be quite useful. Or if you wanted to align this to the top, you can. So that's another fun option there with the group / row / grid block as well.
What does the
And
magic wand use?
the magic wand here, this is an AI plugin that we've been testing out. And basically, I'm going to put together a post on this, on how fun this can be. But basically, when you select a block, it'll have a wand up here that will give you a few AI prompts if you want to generate an image for the text, or you want to do some grammar checks, make it longer, make it shorter, that kind of thing. So that's depending on the type of plugins that are installed, there will be some differences to the toolbar depending on what's available. But in this case, that's what that little guy is. It's a little AI plugin co-writer to help us out.
That's a lot of fun. I have another
Um,
question. You could also use that for like if you have a Q&A section, so you have the question over to the left and you have the answer
yep.
over to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Absolutely.
thinking you could do like a call out, like a quote or something, if you wanted to make that pop out, like if that was basically a quote is the synopsis of the whole article. You could bump that out with colors and pull quotes, right?
Absolutely. And so let's actually move to that next point. I want to get into what covers are. So a cover is another type of container, but it's very specific. So let me just add one. Yeah, we'll just add one here. So I'll come back to my library and type cover. And you can see what this is designed to do, because these are some pre-made. And it's basically what this is designed to do is allow you to put an image as a background and then have text and other content overlaying that background. And then you have like some color overlays and some opacity things to make that a really cool. So I'm just going to add the color. Add the cover, I'm sorry. And when you do that, you have the option of making the background a solid color, or you can use the featured image from the post, which in this case is this image, or you can add any image from your media library. So I'm just going to go grab something real quick. Yeah, here's a nice little nebula space picture. So basically it puts the space picture up here, and let me come back over to the block tab in the settings. You can see kind of there's a lot of stuff over here. So I will take this guy right here, which was our row. And as you see, the cover itself, I'll spin down the cover. The cover is its own thing. Even though it has an image, you don't see any note of the image. There's not like an image block. The image itself is contained in the cover, and the block toolbar is where you would replace the image if you needed to. So it's not an image block at all. It's kind of like just acting as the background for the cover block. Very specific usage. But once again, the cover block is actually a container, so it already has this placeholder paragraph block. But why don't we bring our row in here? I'll get rid of the placeholder paragraph block. Whoops, I think I got rid of the wrong one. This is a good point to point out the undo and redo up here in the toolbar. If I just click undo, it'll fix that. And if you go back, so there's quite a level of undos here, so you don't have to worry about getting lost. What I did is I needed to delete this paragraph. And now we have this nice call out of these two, this row construction with the side by side, and now it's placed in a cover with this cool image as the background. And if we come over to the styles, this is where you see the overlay options. So if you crank this up, you see how the picture disappears because it's just using a black overlay. We can even change that. Let's make it pink so you can see a bit more. So with the opacity all the way down, it's just the picture, makes it a little hard to read. So that's why you add an overlay to make the text a little easier to read. And as you notice, once the opacity passes 50% or around in there, it will change the text color automatically to make it to keep it readable. So that's one of the things that's really nice about the block as well. And so if you change this to even blue or something like that, you can see this one, of course, will just stay white the whole time because the color is darker. So it's taking note of all of those. But if I change it to a lighter color, it'll go black and then go to white as it has the darker image in the background. So I just wanted to kind of demonstrate a little bit on how that works. Let's see. So those are covers, and basically you can put anything in these. So if you wanted to, let's say, to include the next two bits in here, you can just drag it right over, kind of like nesting, and it'll just drag them right in there. And oh, actually, you can see I don't actually want these in the row, so I'm going to drag these above the row. And then I can move the row up. And see, now we have all of this stuff in here that's using the reflection. I'm gonna I'm going to change the, come back to the cover. It's really, you can click on the back of the cover and that'll get you there, or once again in the list view. And I'll come back to the styles and let's get this overlay back to something a little bit more like this so we can see what's going on. Okay, and we can always play with a bunch of these to get what you want and change the things manually. But this is also nice. Let's see, and even being selected in here, if since this is still within the cover, when you do the add below, actually we'll do it here. So if we wanted to add another paragraph after, you see it adds it within the cover. So that's an important thing. So if you're clicked in and you're working with blocks that are contained in a group or a cover in this case, and you use that three-dot menu to add a block directly from the toolbar, it's going to keep it in that container so you can keep working with that content. And you also get these little, these are the inline add blocks too as well. So if we wanted to toss an image in here, go grab one more just to make it a little more messy. And let's say, yeah, we just use a headshot here. And he's awfully large. But we can I don't want to go too far into the individual settings for all of the image blocks because I've got some other stuff for that, but basically you can drag and resize this guy, and now let's align him over to the right, and now it just kind of wraps in. So we've got this is the row stack that's doing kind of like the column ID with those two, and then we've got a couple of paragraphs, and then we've got just a normal floating image to the right here. And if we, just kind of talk through this, we've got the cover, then we've got the cover container, then we've got the row container that has the heading and the paragraph. Then we have our next paragraph, sorry, jump down here, the success paragraph. The image is here, and then the next two paragraphs are here. And once again, as you I mentioned before, these arrows, you can move these up. And as you see, if you move this up, it will float to the right. It'll even float to the right using and interact with that row itself, which isn't quite what we want. But if you move it down below, you can see we get it floating and everything wraps around nicely to the left. And then we've got the row across the top that's got the heading and the paragraph. So this could be a Q&A, the question answer, and then, maybe a little bit of a bio or something if the question revolved around an interview with this particular AI generated gentleman.
Now I've got another thought for something like this. We have usually editors, they put like mugshots of their reporters or their journalists. That would be perfect to kind of highlight their work. Like at the beginning, this is written by Tom Smith, and have a little bio and link it back to the bio page or something fun like that. I can foresee that being really useful.
Exactly. Imagine this is Steve's bio, not biot. And then we grab that image. This is what I love about the list view is I can just grab that image and move it down here because now I want it to be part of Steve's bio.
And that's much faster than the classic editor because you would actually have to mouse over where you want to put it and configure it. This is so much easier.
Exactly. Well, and we can also have, let's just say this is Steve Smith. This is another way you can do covers. So if you actually select the image, once again, you come back to the transformations. We hadn't looked at this one yet. We looked at transforming a list into paragraphs and vice versa. The image is special because it lets you actually transform the image directly into a cover here. And what that does is it's going to create the cover block like we did before. Then it's going to assign the image that you've selected to that background image, and then it'll put the placeholder paragraph in here where I can then either copy this or I can even drag this in. So this is Steve, so I'll just drag Steve in here. And once again, I'm going to get rid of this placeholder paragraph. And then when we select the cover, You can kind of have that in different places, depending on how you want it. And also coming back here, can turn the opacity down like this. And let's come to the paragraph. And we can do a text align right. And now you got like a little Steve Smith thing here. And then if we wanted to maybe add this paragraph as his bio, we've still got, here's our cover right here with Steve. So I'm going to grab this paragraph and drag that into the cover as well. Going to move it down. And we can make this white, something like this. And these are interesting because the cover overlays can be a little funky and you lose things. So the other thing you can do with a cover is actually add another image to the cover. This is one of the fun things I was trying. So if we choose his picture again, we can have something real fun where you have like kind of a background of his picture in addition to his picture. So let's say we move this up. And where's that paragraph? We want to move that one down to, and then we can do the overlay for this guy, something like this. And I can make this back into the center. So something like this, where you get his headshot, then you have a version of his headshot acting as the background, and then you have the content for this little guy. And so this basically is a little component that you can duplicate. So if we just wanted to duplicate this guy, all you'd need to do is then go in and you could replace the images. I've got a couple other headshots to demo here. So we'll select her. And then if we select the cover, I can go and replace that image as well. And then, you know, Jane Carver or whatever. So you can basically kind of reuse these as you make them and just duplicate them and you have them. And you can even take these, and if I basically, you can just, we hadn't talked about this, but if you copy this and you go to another block editor post, you can just select and do command paste. And now I've moved that entire thing in toto into a completely different article where it can be used. So one of the other things that's really cool is you can reuse blocks just by copying and pasting. Our next webinar that we want to get into is going to go into what they call patterns and reusable blocks and stuff. And so this is kind of touching on that, but I don't want to go too far into it because that's a pretty advanced topic. But I did want to basically show that these are kind of like self-contained units that you're building.
I was just going to mention that, Chris. That's a good
Yeah.
point with the
Yeah.
patterns. I'm curious that we got a lot of people from Florida Weekly on today. If you all have any ideas on how you guys could use this, because you know your paper is kind of very more like a magazine than a lot of newspapers. I at least in my view, and complex graphics. So I'm curious where you might want to use this on articles or like with Chris's examples, you know, just like an about us page that has a bit more depth to it than just plain text, getting the images up there with the backgrounds. Also, Vera's idea of having a more stylized author block. That I like that idea a lot. I think it would make sense to create a pattern for that because those would be reused frequently, and then you'd want it to be really easy to add. But I'm just curious if anyone listening has any other examples of things that you'd like to try to use this for. Sorry, Vera, I didn't mean to speak over you. Did you have something else?
I was thinking, I've seen a lot of articles on politics, like candidates running for office when it comes time to vote. Those blocks would be fantastic to highlight and showcase, maybe have a little bio under each candidate, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or independent. I know a lot of papers do info pages on the candidates. That could be used seamlessly in that.
And I'm bringing up like here was the testimonial post where I'm using a combination of the cover and an image and some of the quote blocks and things like that to create testimonials. Same thing here. This is similar to what we were just making there, Vera, where you had text on the side and a picture with a little bit of that. I was looking for the staff directory. I actually made a staff directory. I think it's here. Yeah, so here's an example of a staff directory I made, and this is basically doing exactly the same thing. There's a cover with an image, a heading, and a list, and then I basically duplicated those covers and reversed the alignment of the images, and then all of those were just added to a grid with 2 columns, and they flow just like that. So this is something that it can be built very very simply using the method that I just showed to build these. And just to reemphasize, it's just a cover with an image. I can transfer, instead of having her name be a paragraph, I can make this is another transform you can do, paragraph directly into a heading. And so we can make that as an H3, something like that, and then another paragraph. And so these are just some of the ways where we're getting beyond just, we're entering content. Now we're actually manipulating content for the layout itself. There was one thing I wanted to make sure I covered. So this is a lot on laying out content and things like that, but there is one thing that we need to touch on if I come back over here, and that is where things have gone, where they were in the classic editor. We call these meta boxes, but basically it's stuff like assigning subheads, assigning bylines, categories, all those kind of things that that you need to do as part of the metadata of your post. So I was gonna come back over. I'll show you this on the classic editor. So in the classic editor, all this stuff kind of lives over here in the right sidebar, your featured images and everything. And then you keep scrolling down from the editor area, and then you have a few more of these. And these can be dragged around and stuff in the classic editor for reordering and things like that. But let's see what that looks like in the block editor. So I'll come over here in the sidebar. You want to make sure article is selected or post or whatever type you're going to be using. And then you'll have your normal meta stuff down here, categories and all of that. Here, I'll hide the list view for a second. And then just the same, if you scroll down, here's bylines and subheads and things like that are all down here. In the same context of that, there over in the 3-dot menu, I did show some of the the view options, but I didn't show the preferences. So if you bring up preferences, what this does is it gives you a list of all of those blocks. So your paywall, additions, subhead, byline, well, most of these are turned on by default, but this is where you would find any that you hadn't, if you needed to find some to basically do a customization. Like, let's say there's a bunch of blocks that are in here that you don't really use. You can actually deselect them and have them hidden from your library and stuff. So that can be very helpful. But I just wanted to make sure, if you need to set up a subhead or add a byline, these kind of things, this works exactly the same as it does in the classic editor. Let me even hop over to, where was the one that had that? Yeah, let me just jump in to edit post here. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, this is the one I should have showed you. So this is, once again, this is a post, but it's similar. But yeah, so you get we've got an all-in-one SEO plugin on here, so you'll see that. The categories are here where you can do a search. You've got tags. If there's a social share plugin running on your site, that some of those things will show up. So these are the panels that get added with different plugin settings. And then scrolling down again, there's a bunch more stuff in here because of the different plugins that are set up. But like, let's see, excerpts and login forms and all these kind of things are all in here. And once again, we can come over to the preferences and you can see what's available and everything's showing. Let's see, top toolbar. And yeah, which blocks are being shown, all that kind of stuff is similar. And let's see, get out of the preferences back to the sidebar. And once again here, like back in the classic editor, your publish settings, so all the stuff about visibility and revisions. I apologize for that background noise. That's all lives right here at the top of the block as well. So all of those things are still available. They're in a couple of different places, but they're fairly in the same place. They just don't always show up unless you switch over to, there's no difference between article and block over here. This just shows everything. So you just want to remember that you'll need to make sure you're viewing the article block to get those meta level things such as categories, bylines, and also your view and your publication stuff. As you see, this is in draft, so you can change that, et cetera, et cetera. And then, whenever you're ready to do the publish or your save your draft, that's all still right here. Let's see, was there anything else in the meta boxes? I think that's everything. Were there any? Yeah, I'm just going to open it up to any questions because I've run through most of the very specific things that I wanted to point out. But if there's any kind of specific thing, maybe you've even tried something in the block editor and it didn't work that we could address, or if you'd just like to see a couple more examples.
Hey, Chris, I was just thinking if we could try to hear from everyone, if you could locate the webinar chat and just let us know if you have logged on and used the block editor.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that we showed a little bit about last week. Because with Florida Weekly, we're doing these extractions and they're probably ending up in the classic editor.
Yeah.
By default. So yeah, maybe just some of those settings. But if I'm not seeing anyone messaging in the chat, so I'm not sure if there's an issue with you all seeing that or what, but you can there we go. So testing. Yeah.
That was from me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I haven't seen anything this time. So now I'm starting to wonder if they've wanted to ask questions but couldn't. But we're just trying to get an idea of where everyone's at, because on Florida Weekly the default probably is classic still, I would assume, and that's a site-wide setting. Is that right, or is that a user level setting?
I'm pretty sure that's site-wide. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Olivia just got back. We use classic. Yeah. So, I mean, just one thing, maybe as like kind of a final thing here, because we are coming up on an hour and I appreciate everyone's time very much.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just show, because this is how we'll extract it, and then we can just show how you turn it into a block.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So in the article editor, we've got ours set to be the block editor as the default. But let me see where I lost it. Here it is. So embrace the block editor. Right under here, there's a classic edit here. And so if I click on that, it's going to open it up in the classic editor that we were just seeing. However, if I go back, and and it may be on your sites, if the classic editor is set as default, this will say block editor instead. So
Right.
clicking on the main title would open up the classic editor. In our case, this is reversed. Clicking on the title editor is going to open up this in the block editor. And so I can show you, this is an article that was created and drafted in the classic editor. And then, well, I've been working it in the block editor, so it's all here now. I can get rid of that. And
Yeah, we'll want to, yeah, if we could maybe find an example, let's see, of one that's in classic, we could just show them that step. But I just have a question for the group. If you all happen to be logged onto your site, if you can see what Chris is talking about there, where it says edit and then it says block editor as a separate option. And that should be the case for you because your default is set to classic. So when you hit edit, it goes to classic. Just an extra thing to remember if you want to start testing out block editor without making it default across the site.
so let me make sure. Okay, so this should open it in block, but with the classic block. Make sure that's working. No, I must have saved it. Okay.
It's no problem. It's just this one step that you would want to take after we do our extraction. If you want to start to
Actually,
use these
I
blocks.
can just do this. Let me create a quick little dirty post here.
Right. This is like what we're doing for you from the PDF.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna add a new article. Was that the right one? No, that's not the right one. It's that thing.
Right. Site origin builder. That's not going to really be necessary with block editor anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go.
Nice.
So this is a test classic, and I'm just going to save this as a draft. And you can see here how it's got like some list stuff here and all that. And there's oh, look at that. It reopened it when I saved it into the block editor, which is actually kind of cool. Because now what this is showing you is if I had opened something that's created in the classic editor and you open it in the block editor, this is what it looks like. You basically have one block called a classic block, and you can even see it looks like, oh, I lost one. Where is it? Okay, that's nonetheless. But this toolbar looks remarkably similar to the toolbar at the top of the classic editor. So that's kind of what this is. This is like a little embedded classic editor in a block. So, but what we want to be able to do is take advantage of having all of these separated out into the individual blocks so we can do all that layout stuff. So when you do open up something that was created in Classic Editor, right here, you click on that classic block and you immediately have this option to convert it to normal blocks. And when you do that, it runs through everything. And now we've got the paragraph. It knew and took care of the list. So you've got the list and the list items like I was showing you before. And then it's got the next paragraph. And now you have access to all of the layout, typography, if we wanted to, change this to a group and then add a cover to it with a thing, all those kind of things are now immediately available once it gets converted to blocks in the block editor.
Right. Yep. And just to get to that point, you just got to hit block edit or block editor instead of edit on the story, and you'll see what
Yeah, let's go back to the list again because it kind of took me right to it.
Right. Yeah, I figure that's because that's your default.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna.
So I'm going back to see here.
It's staying classic.
It is cool, Olivia. I used to use Classic for a lot of time, up until the block editor release. And as they have new technology, new functionality and features, there's so much more you can do with this. So
I'm eager to see how you guys finally use it and what you're going to be using it for. I'm interested in your idea.
So here it is once again, just to go back, here it is still living in the classic editor. And then right here, this is test classic. And now if I click on, there's edit as well as this, and either of these should take us into the block editor with that as a classic block, because I didn't save what I just did. So yeah, here you go. So now it comes back in. So this is how you would have gotten to the same place from the article list. And then once you select the classic block, you can do the conversion. And then once again, you can, do the, I'm going to select those two, can bring this down. I usually like to use a group first. And then with a group, you can add the group into a cover and it gives you this cool background stuff that you can then come over, go to the overlay, do your gradients, however you might want to do that kind of thing. And yeah, it basically makes it pretty easy to keep all the content and as much of the layout that you set up in the classic editor. So if we had, images over there, it'll add those to image blocks. You saw how the list was added to a list block. So it's very good at making sure that the appropriate blocks are converted and created from the classic editor content. Some things may not come through very well, like tables and things like that, but there are other ways to handle that content once it's been brought into the block editor if it doesn't quite transfer. But what we'd really like you guys to maybe think about is just starting with the block editor. But if there's something that you just really are more comfortable with using the classic editor for a specific piece of content, you can add classic block. And then you've got just this block where you can say, I want like a scoreboard table or something like that you really want to have access to a classic editor interface. You can still do that. And then this interacts with all of the other blocks just the same. So you can put a cover behind it, all kinds of stuff, So the classic block actually allows you to have those classic editor things, but then integrate with all the other block stuff as well, So that's one thing. You're not really losing any of the functionality of the classic editor. You're just kind of compartmentalizing it into its own block that then can interact with these other Gutenberg style blocks and things like that.
It's an upgrade.
Yeah, that's a good way to
Yeah.
put it. It's a classic block. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Great overview, Chris. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap this up? We will provide the video link. We've got it recording.
And
it'll be
basically this
timestamped.
blog post here, we can share. This was the slides. I just basically copied a lot of the content from here, or a subset of the content from here for this the presentation. But this has a good bit more detail on like the drag and drop stuff, and it's got some more screenshots that are definite. So we'll share this with you guys as well as the recording with some chapterization. So hopefully you can, at your leisure, take your time, familiarize yourself, and dip your toe in, try it out, and then let us know if you run into anything, because we're always excited to help you guys extend your tool set.
I did want to say one thing that I noticed that you didn't mention. One thing that I noticed that you can do is, like, for images, you know how you can go through the media library and upload that way? You can actually pull an image from your local computer, like your desktop, and drag it right into the article.
You can.
Yes, sir. I thought that was worth mentioning because a lot of journalists, they'll have everything localized and they
Well,
want to.
let's test it out. Let me grab my little thing here, and I've got a PNG that I've been using. So if you just drop this in, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Okay.
How awesome is that?
Oh, right. So it takes it's now, okay. So what's happening is it's grayed out and it's got a little it's got a little progress circle running here, because what's happening is the server is actually doing a little bit of processing on this guy to get it smushed. But yeah, there it is. That I did not realize that. Yeah, and it's living right here, and now we can convert that to a cover and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I did not realize you could drag image media directly into the content area. That's awesome. And
I'm
let's
glad I
go.
brought it up.
And if we come back into the media library, that should be, yep, there it is. So it actually does add it to the media library. So if you needed to come back and add a caption or do anything like that, you can. So that's very cool. Yeah, drag and drop right in, change it to a cover, do a little of this, do a little of that, and you're good to go. Very nice. Great, 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 great point out there, Vera. I was not aware of that one at all. Cool.
Well, that's what these are all about. We're all learning every time and hoping to learn from publishers on how you can use this. So,
And I think maybe we can tease a little bit, like with
sure.
the next, what we want to do with the next webinar is actually look, there's something called patterns over here. And as I was saying about the, being able to kind of consolidate these and like these are kind of like little blocks of things that you might want to reuse. Well, what we're going to show you next time is how you can add these into your own pattern library. So over here, there's like a bunch of ones that are included with WordPress by default. These are using covers and images, stuff, all the same stuff I've been showing you. These are just already pre-made. You can drag and drop them in and then replace your copy and your images as you'd like. But what's cool is you can have my patterns. And as you see, here's that staff directory that I had built. So this could be reused between articles. And there's even some synchronized patterns that basically you can edit the pattern in one place and everywhere else it appears in any articles or anything like that will also be updated. So that's a really cool place where you can find things that are pre-made, or you can make some of your own things and kind of put them in something kind of like a Creative Cloud library where you have some of your own branded components or stuff that you use often that you might just want to have in this pattern. So anytime you're creating a new article in the block editor, you go to my patterns. I want this featured image thing with the splash and the headline to be the top of the article. You just drag and drop, update the image and the copy. You're good to go. So basically a big time saver, depending on how you're using these things. But that is going to be, I think, I'm not sure if our next webinar is going to be next week, but the next one is we're planning on doing some block pattern overview and introduction. And then, of course, any of you guys who want to come back and visit us for that, and you got some questions that may come up in between, we can maybe take some time to field those questions as well. That would be really cool.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, the more feedback, the better, everyone. So any other topics you'd want to focus on in the future, let us know. But we'll keep you updated in the weekly newsletter on each week's topic and the invite info there. So.
And we'll send out the blog post to kind of, because there's a few that we haven't really covered, but I've already got some blog posts that demonstrate a bit more of using the cover block, of some of the more details there and image galleries and stuff. And so those will be on your dashboard. Let's see. I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on this dashboard. So if you just come to the dashboard, there should be in the news feed, there'll be I'm trying to keep some of these block editor posts coming out to you. So when you log into your admin dashboard, if there's, yeah, here we go. Yeah, so here's the post for today's webinar and the announcement. And this is the post I was just mentioning on the images and media. This covers a lot of the cover block stuff, things like that. So if you keep an eye here on our feed, and you want to subscribe to the newsletter if you're not already, that'll keep you up to date when I'm putting out these blog posts in between the webinars, because I'm thinking a lot of the webinars will be kind of going back through some of these blog posts and going through them in detail, and then fielding questions in real time and interacting with you guys and seeing what you guys are thinking about stuff. So Matt, I think
Good.
that's everything I've got.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you for the questions, Vera. And thank you everyone for joining. We'll follow up with you with some more info. Olivia says,
Thank you, Olivia.
so much. Yeah, thank you. You have a great weekend as well. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Fly so high, I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.